Harper and George Bush have the interests of women in Middle East and Central Asia in mind, when here at home, if Harper had a majority, he'd go after the right of women to choice. But even in his current situation, he's gutted the status of women. He's attacked funding for women's shelters for abused women, and carried out a really concerted effort against the women's movement in Canada. So really, let's be serious about the motivations and the rationale that are presented to us. Stephen Harper will never be a friend of the women of Afghanistan. Thank you.
I briefly referred to the tone of this discussion or debate or dialogue or whatever you want to call it in Canada, so I just want to go back to that. I think it's important to say I'm profoundly disturbed by the tone of the debate taking place in this country with regards to Afghanistan. It's been characterized by an ever-growing alignment between the radical left and extremist movements such as Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, and now apparently the Taliban, and has been shrouded in cultural relativism arguments of the most despicable kind. It has placed the idea of universal human rights so far into the background it is absent from the discussion altogether. And it has been characterized by a plethora of armchair commentating by those far removed from Afghanistan. This debate has largely excluded Afghans and Afghan Canadians. It has not paid attention to any one of the 18 or more polls which have been conducted in Afghanistan in recent years, asking what Afghans think of the NATO presence, what their hopes are for the future, and many other issues. And quoting Malalai Joya is not the same as talking to Afghans and including Afghans. Malalai Joya has consistently contradicted herself, saying in one breath that foreign troops are not wanted in Afghanistan, that it's an occupation, and in another breath that their withdrawal would certainly lead to a civil war. I just wanted to bring in here the work of a woman named Jean Elshtain, because I think it's somewhat relevant to this discussion. She's talked about the triumph of the therapeutic culture with its celebration of a self that views the world slowly through the prism of the self. It's a quivering, sentimental self that gets uncomfortable very quickly, because this self has to feel good about itself all the time. Such selves do not make arguments, they validate other arguments. To me, this defines the troops out polemics. It's all about us, about Canada's international reputation, about what a military mission like this is doing to our culture, about whether the mission is right for Canada, about whether the mission makes us a tool of American imperialism, and so on. It's the does my ass look big in these jeans question, never the what is best for Afghanistan question. My main argument is simply this, that this is the wrong argument altogether. We have simplified this issue of troops out, troops in, and the answer to that question is not what will determine the likelihood of peace for Afghanistan. We need to reorient the focus towards the root causes of insecurity, and I mean insecurity from a holistic perspective, human insecurity, which goes far beyond the presence or absence of Canadian troops in Afghanistan. The real war in Afghanistan is about poverty, it's about deforestation, it's about exposure, like you mentioned, lack of electricity. It's about little access to higher education, about growing unemployment, food security, corruption in the government and NGOs. Ignoring these issues, excluding them from our dialogue and our attempts to influence policy making, we do at the peril of Afghans. These issues are totally absent from our public discussions in Canada. They're absent from the agendas of our political parties debating these issues. In sum, our bickering here barely reflects the realities in Afghanistan, and I would be ashamed for many of my Afghan colleagues to ever have to be privy to some of the discussions we're having here.
3 minutes for rebuttal.
Well, let's talk a little more about Malalai Joya, because to date, this woman, the youngest Afghan parliamentarian, a hero to many Afghans, for as a 25-year-old in 2003, speaking up as the youngest delegate at the Loya Jirga Constitutional Assembly, being the only person with the guts to stand up and say, the people in this room are warlords and war criminals, and we don't want them coming back to power in Afghanistan. Thank you very much. This is Malalai Joya's message, and respectfully, Lauryn, who are you to tell Malala Joya that she doesn't know about the women of Afghanistan? I think these questions do matter to us as Canadians, and I think it is important that we have a vigorous debate. And unfortunately, politically, although we're in a so-called democracy, we have corporate power rules the day in Canada, and it's very difficult for anti-war views to find expression in the House of Commons. That's why we have anti-war movements. That's why some of us organize protests every couple of months in the streets of Vancouver. That's why we go out with petitions, not because we're gluttons for punishment or we have an affection for megaphones, but because we have to find a way to raise our voice and say no to this Harper agenda of endless war. So it's not some form of nihilism or lack of respect for universal principles. The people and the coalitions of StopWar is not strictly focused on Afghanistan. In fact, we're made up of activists and people from all walks of life who work on issues going back from East Timor to the war on Yugoslavia, to solidarity with workers' struggles in Iran and preventing another front in the war on terror there. We have taken stands in solidarity with the people of Haiti. By the way, Canada overthrew a secular democratic government in Haiti in 2004. This is Canadian foreign policy is not just about Afghanistan, and so our agenda is about opposing. You use the word imperialism. It's an old-fashioned word, but it's coming back into fashion because once again we have the big powers racing around the Middle East, racing around Africa, trying to snatch up the rest of the oil and the energy resources as the world reaches peak oil. And as the corporations demand more and more of these wars. So that's what we do, and that's what the anti-war movement is about. We defend the universal principles, and we defend the right of people to decide their own future, to govern themselves. We believe the people in Haiti, the people in Iran, people in Iraq, quite obviously, can do better than the imperial powers who have come in to impose their own regimes. And we think the people of Afghanistan are no lesser than any other people, and they deserve the right to decide their own future. And it's not just that the Canadian military should leave. We should pay for the damage done. When you pick something up in the store and you break it, you pay for it. And Canada needs to pay reparations to Afghanistan. And of the aid money we are pouring into Afghanistan, it should stop going to build mansions. It should stop going to drug lords and warlords, and it should start being directed directly to grassroots social justice organizations, women's groups on the ground, like the projects that people like Malala Joya run in Afghanistan. That's where the money should be going. Thank you.
So I'll just start with a question to you for hopefully to be answered in your final comments. And that question is, if Canadian troops up and leave Afghanistan, what happens next? If the consequences mean war or theocracy, can we as Canadians live with that? And are you comfortable with that outcome? Perhaps I'll start by clarifying why I was brought to Ottawa on International Women's Day and had a photo with the Prime Minister. My organization, Women for Women in Afghanistan, recently accepted government money for the first time in its 12-year existence to do a teacher training project in Afghanistan. CEDA is actually matching the money that we've been raising for teacher salaries for the last few years. We've raised $750,000 just through our volunteer work and our fundraising. So they're matching that money. We went there to discuss the project with them. And I have another question for you. I'm wondering who's claiming that this war is about women's rights. I wish it was, but I've never really heard that claim substantiated as the main reason that we're in Afghanistan. Self-immolation, all of those issues that are affecting Afghan women, that's absolutely true that that's happening, and it's despicable. But NATO didn't cause those problems. They're the cause of 30 years of war in Afghanistan. And 30 years of being totally ignored by the international community until now. The track record for women's rights in Afghanistan has been extremely mixed. There's been progress in some areas and regress in other areas. I wish we had the time to sort of go into all of that.